I drove 9 hours through a rainstorm with arthritis in my knees and a homemade carrot cake on the passenger seat to surprise my daughter on her 50th birthday. But when I walked in soaked to the bone, I heard laughter from the kitchen. God, I hope she crashes. Then we wouldn't have to deal with her constant calls, my daughter Laurel's voice clear as day. Her husband replied, or at least get lost. Give us a weekend without the guilt trips. They laughed. I left the cake on the counter. 9 days later, I changed my will. 3 weeks after that, they were still wondering why their credit cards were declined. At 78, I finally learned revenge is a dish best served with financial consequences. My name is Bertie Matt, widow of 12 years, cancer survivor, retired librarian who still alphabetizes her spice rack. After Harold died, I stayed in our two-story colonial in Millbrook because the memories felt like company. I've lived alone with his cardigan still hanging on the bedroom door and the garden he planted now flourishing under my careful hands. The relationship with my only child has been cooling for years, though I pretended not to notice. Our weekly calls grew shorter, her tone tightening whenever I mentioned visiting. Their excuses multiplied like weeds: work commitments, house renovations, social obligations that somehow never included space for me. Last Christmas, they went to Barbados instead of coming home. Work's been crazy, Ken explained, while their Instagram showed beachfront cocktails and sunset cruises. I blame myself. Too needy, too melancholy, too much the grieving widow who couldn't move on. I sent care packages anyway, homemade cookies, hand-knit scarves, birthday checks that grew larger as my desperation for their attention deepened. I became the grandmother who waited by the phone and saved newspaper clippings they'd never read. What I never suspected, what no mother imagines, is how completely they had monetized my love. The credit cards I guaranteed while they renovated their kitchen, the loans for their starter home that somehow grew to a four-bedroom Tudor with a heated pool, the beach house down payment they secured while telling me they couldn't afford plane tickets to visit for my birthday. The rain falls differently now, not as a storm to be weathered, but as a reminder that even the hardest downpours eventually clear. When the financial dominoes I carefully arranged began to fall, when their carefully constructed lives began to crumble without my silent support, I discovered something surprising. Strength isn't measured by what you endure, but by what you finally refuse to accept. This is how I learned to stop being a doormat and start being the storm. The cake took me 2 days to make, 3 layers of carrot cake with cream cheese frosting, decorated with tiny marzipan carrots I'd shaped with fingers that don't bend like they used to. Each carrot took nearly 10 minutes, rolling the orange-tinted marzipan, pinching one end to a point, adding the tiny green stems. I made 24 of them, arranged in a circle on top like a little garden. Laurel had loved carrot cake since she was 7, when she declared at her birthday party that chocolate was too obvious. I'd risen before dawn on baking day, laying out butter to soften while I grated carrots until my wrist ached. The recipe was my mother's, enhanced over decades with extra cinnamon and a hint of nutmeg. Harold used to steal fingerfuls of frosting when he thought I wasn't looking. I'd pretend not to notice. "You're driving all that way alone, Bertie?" Theda asked when I told her my plan. She stood on her side of the hedge that separated our driveways, secateurs in hand, gray curls escaping from beneath her gardening hat. We'd been neighbors for 32 years, ever since she moved in after her divorce. She watched Laurel grow up, helped me care for Harold during his final months, brought me casseroles when cancer left me too weak to cook. "It's not the Oregon Trail, Theta. I'm taking the interstate." "Not the point, Bertie. The weather report says heavy rain all the way to Connecticut. And your knees." "My knees and I have come to an understanding," I said, carefully placing the cake carrier in my trunk, nestled between two pillows to keep it from sliding. "They complain and I ignore them." Theta sighed, the way she always did when she knew arguing was pointless. "At least take your cell phone and call me when you get there." "Yes, Mother," I teased, though we were the same age. "Someone has to look out for you," she muttered, turning back to her roses. I left at 4:30 a.m., my overnight bag packed with my good cardigan and the lavender hand cream Laurel used to love when she was small. The thermos of coffee beside me was still steaming, filling the car with the scent of French roast and the cinnamon I'd sprinkled on top. The radio played softly, the oldies station that Harold and I used to dance to in our kitchen. The rain started just outside of Millbrook, fat drops splattering against my windshield like the beginning of a confession. By the time I reached the state line, it had become a constant pummeling sheet that reduced visibility to the taillights of the car ahead. My windshield wipers struggled to keep pace, squeaking across the glass in a rhythm that matched the throbbing in my knees. "You should have listened to Theta," I muttered, adjusting my grip on the wheel. My fingers ached from the damp, but I kept driving, 9 hours ahead, rain falling steadily. What was pain compared to Laurel's face when she saw me? I pictured her wide eyes, the surprised squeal, the long-missed hug. The highway blurred in sheets of water. Trucks roared by, spraying blinding waves. I slowed, hunched forward, eyes straining. The cake sat beside me, my offering of love. At a rest stop, I stretched my stiff knees, rubbed icy hot on aching joints. "Long drive?" asked a bathroom attendant. "Halfway there," I said. "Storm's getting worse." But I couldn't wait. Birthdays don't. I hadn't told Laurel I was coming. The surprise mattered. It was my way past the distance that had crept between us. Back on the road, I turned the heat up to combat the chill that had settled in my bones. The dashboard clock read 9:47 a.m. 5 more hours, assuming the weather didn't slow me further. I popped an ibuprofen dry, grimacing at the bitterness. To distract myself from the pain, I let my mind wander to earlier birthdays. Laurel at 6, delight illuminating her face as she unwrapped the dollhouse I'd spent months furnishing, with tiny hand-sewn curtains and miniature picture frames filled with family photos. Laurel at 12, blowing out candles on a chocolate cake shaped like a stack of books, her Nancy Drew phase in full swing. Laurel at 16, pretending the necklace I'd saved for months to buy wasn't exactly what she wanted, only to wear it every day for the next 2 years. When had things changed? When had my calls become interruptions, my visits obligations, my existence somewhere between inconvenience and embarrassment? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. Perhaps after Harold died, when grief made me needier than I'd ever been. Or when she married Kent, whose family vacation home and country club membership made my modest colonial seem quaint rather than cozy. Or maybe when I got sick, and the possibility of having to care for me became a specter, hovering over her carefully curated life. The rain intensified as I crossed into Connecticut, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. A truck jackknifed ahead, forcing traffic to crawl around the emergency vehicles, their flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement. My GPS recalculated, adding 45 minutes to my arrival time. By early afternoon, my body was a symphony of complaints, lower back spasming, neck stiff, knees radiating pain despite the medication. But determination is its own kind of painkiller. I'd driven through blizzards to get Laurel to dance recitals, navigated flooded roads to reach her college graduation. A little rainstorm and arthritis wouldn't stop me now. The suburbs of Hartford appeared through the rain like a mirage, familiar street names on exit signs offering reassurance that I was nearly there. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, lipstick faded, hair flattened on one side from leaning against the window. No matter, I'd freshen up before I presented myself. As I turned into Laurel's subdivision, the rain lightened briefly, as if offering me a moment of clarity. The houses stood proud and separate, each with manicured lawns despite the weather. Laurel's Tudor, the largest on the cul-de-sac, glowed warm against the darkening afternoon. Through the front window, I could see movement, shadows passing back and forth. Birthday preparations, I assumed, for a party I hadn't been invited to attend. I parked across the street, not in their driveway, part of the surprise. Carefully, I lifted the cake carrier, checked one last time that the marzipan carrots were intact, and stepped out into the rain. The walk to their front door was only 20 feet, but by the time I reached it, my raincoat was soaked through, water trickling down my neck and into my sensible shoes. I didn't ring the bell. The door was unlocked, as it always was when they were expecting company. Birthday company, just not me. I stepped into the entryway, water pooling beneath my shoes. The house smelled of rosemary and garlic, something roasting that reminded me of the dinner parties Laurel and Kent hosted for their friends, gatherings I'd stopped being invited 2 years ago. Their home was a testament to careful curation. The antique console table that had cost more than my first car. The abstract paintings Laurel assured me were valuable, despite looking like something a child might create. The carefully arranged family. Photos that didn't include a single picture of me. The marble floor of the foyer gleamed beneath recessed lighting, cool and pristine against my wet footprints. I hesitated, suddenly uncertain. Should I call out, announce myself? The cake felt heavy in my arms, the weight of expectation more burdensome than its 3 layers. Voices drifted from the kitchen, laughter punctuating whatever conversation flowed between my daughter and her husband. I moved forward slowly, rehearsing my entrance. Surprise, too cliché. Happy birthday, sweetheart, too saccharine. Perhaps just a simple hello would suffice. I was about to round the corner when I heard my name. Mom called again this morning, Laurel said, her voice carrying that edge I'd noticed lately. Third time this week. What did she want this time? Kent's voice slightly bored. I froze, cake box growing heavy in my arms. Same as always. To talk about nothing for an hour, to remind me she's alone, to make me feel guilty for living my own life. My breath caught in my throat. I should have left then, turned around, and walked away with my dignity intact. But my feet seemed rooted to the spot, my body unable to process the command to retreat. At least she didn't invite herself for your birthday, Kent said. Remember last year, she stayed for 5 days. Don't remind me. I had to hide in our bedroom just to get some peace. Each word landed like a physical blow. I stood perfectly still, rain dripping from my coat onto their polished hardwood floor. She mentioned something about maybe visiting soon, Laurel continued. I told her we were busy with work. Good. The last thing we need is her showing up unannounced. The irony might have been amusing if it weren't so devastating. I pictured them as they must be, Laurel at the kitchen island chopping vegetables, Kent stirring something on the stove, their domesticity a performance for each other rather than an authentic expression of warmth. God, I hope she crashes, Laurel said suddenly, and my heart stopped. Then we wouldn't have to deal with her constant calls. Kent laughed. Or at least get lost. Give us a weekend without the guilt trips. Their laughter mingled like poison and honey. The cake box trembled in my hands. My daughter, the same child I'd nursed through chicken pox and driven to midnight emergency rooms, whose science projects I'd rescued at 2 a.m., whose broken hearts I'd mended with ice cream and patience, had just wished for my death. And her husband, the man who'd promised to honor the family he was joining, had laughed. I don't remember deciding to move. My body simply carried me forward into the kitchen, where they stood, Laurel chopping vegetables, Kent stirring something on the stove, exactly as I'd imagined. Their faces, when they saw me, shock draining the color from their cheeks, mouths opening in perfect circles of horror. Time suspended itself in that moment. I could see the realization dawn in their eyes, calculations racing as they tried to determine how much I'd heard, what damage control would be required. I saw Laurel's hand rise to her throat, a gesture she'd inherited from me, something we did when words failed us. I didn't speak, didn't cry. I simply placed the cake box on the counter, turned, and walked back through the door I'd entered. Mom, Laurel called after me. Mom, wait. But I was already in the rain again, moving faster than my old knees should allow, back to my car, back to the road that had brought me here. Bertie, please. Kent's voice joined the chorus of my name. We didn't mean. I closed the car door on their excuses, turned the key in the ignition with hands that had stopped shaking. Strange how clarity can arrive in the moment everything falls apart. The windshield wipers swept away the rain, metronomic in their persistence. Left, right, truth, love, indifference. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the driveway. Laurel's arms wrapped around herself, Kent's hand on her shoulder. They looked small and insignificant, dwindling as I drove away. I didn't look back again. The rain seemed to intensify as I reached the highway, as if nature itself were providing cover for my retreat. My clothes clung to my skin, cold and uncomfortable, but the discomfort seemed distant, secondary to the hollowness expanding in my chest. The passenger seat, now empty of its precious cargo, looked forlorn in the gray afternoon light. My phone began to buzz in my purse, once, twice, then continuously, as texts and calls poured in, I didn't need to check the screen to know it was Laurel, frantically trying to repair what couldn't be fixed. I switched it to silent without looking. Where does one go when home has been revealed as an illusion? When the love you've counted on proves conditional, the relationship you've nurtured reveals itself as obligation. The highway stretched before me, a ribbon of possibilities, none of them leading back to what I believed to be true an hour ago. I drove aimlessly until the gas light came on, the persistent glow, a reminder that even in emotional crisis, practical matters demand attention. A motel appeared through the rain, one of those roadside establishments with outdated decor and questionable cleanliness. The flickering vacancy sign seemed like an omen, offering not just shelter but anonymity. The room smelled of disinfectant and old cigarettes. The floral bedspread, a poor approximation of cheerfulness. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my damp clothes, and stared at the wallpaper until my eyes unfocused. For the first time since overhearing those devastating words, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. This wasn't just about a cruel comment made in a moment of frustration. This was the culmination of years of subtle dismissals, of increasingly transparent excuses, of a relationship that had been wilting while I'd continued to water it with hope. My daughter had not simply rejected my visit, she had rejected my place in her life. My phone buzzed 17 times that night. I didn't answer. Morning arrived through thin motel curtains. I'd slept in my clothes, too numb to care about comfort. My phone had finally fallen silent around 2 a.m., battery drained from constant notifications. In the harsh bathroom light, I barely recognized my reflection. My eyes looked hollow, the lines around my mouth deeper. I showered and dressed in yesterday's clothes, then checked my phone. 27 missed calls, 42 text messages. Laurel, Mom, please call us back. You misunderstood. Laurel, we were just joking around. It wasn't about you. Kent. Bertie, please let us explain. Laurel, Mom, I'm worried. Where are you? Laurel, this isn't fair. You're scaring me. Kent, at least let us know you're safe. Laurel, if you don't call back, I'm going to have to call the police. The last was a bluff. Laurel wouldn't risk explaining why her elderly mother had fled in distress. I turned the phone face down and considered my options. I could go home, pretend it never happened. I could confront them, demand an apology. Or I could do something entirely different. This wasn't the first disappointment. There had been smaller betrayals I'd ignored. The Christmas they'd canceled, claiming Kent had the flu, then posted Instagram photos from a Vermont ski resort. The weekend visit when my toiletries were moved from the guest bathroom to a closet before. Their friends arrived. The graduation gift I'd sent to Kent's niece that received a thank you card addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Richards, as if from strangers. Moments I'd dismissed as oversights now formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Instead of driving home or back to Laurel's, I entered a new address in my GPS, a residence inn in White Plains, close enough to retrieve what I needed from home, far enough from Laurel to maintain distance, a space where I could think without the weight of routine. My phone rang again, not Laurel or Kent, but Theta. Bertie, thank God, I've been calling since yesterday. Are you all right? Laurel called me, said something happened. I heard them, Theta. I heard my daughter say she hoped I would crash my car and die. Silence for 3 heartbeats. Where are you? She finally asked, voice tight with controlled anger. Heading to White Plains. Good. Don't go back there. Come home when you're ready. I've got that bottle of Glenfiddich Harold gave me before he died. I think it's time we opened it. For the first time since walking into Laurel's kitchen, I felt a smile tug at my mouth. Not happiness, it was too soon for that, but recognition of a truth I'd overlooked. I might have lost a daughter, but I wasn't alone. I'll be home in a few days, I said. Keep the scotch cold. That's not how you drink scotch, you heathen, Theta replied, and the normalcy of our banter felt like the first solid ground I'd touched in 24 hours. I disconnected and continued driving, the highway unfurling before me like a question I wasn't ready to answer. The rain had left everything washed clean, the world refreshed, in a way I couldn't yet feel. But somewhere between the hurt and the horizon, a small, determined part of me had begun to consider what might come next. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but something else. 3 days at the residence inn gave me something I hadn't experienced in years: solitude without loneliness, no phone calls to answer, no appearances to maintain. I bought new clothes at a nearby mall, practical items, nothing like the floral dresses Laurel always suggested would brighten my look. I silenced my phone except for calls from Theta, who provided updates on my house and my cat, Mr. Darcy. "You know they came here, right?" Theta said during our nightly call. "Laurel and Kent, knocking on your door, then mine when they realized you weren't home." "What did you tell them?" "That you were safe and would contact them when ready." "Kent tried that charm thing he does. I'm old, not stupid." On my fourth morning away, I called my bank. "I'd like information about accounts where I'm listed as guarantor," I said after verifying my identity. The customer service representative hesitated. "Do you mean joint accounts, Mrs. Matt?" "No, accounts where I've provided financial backing. Credit cards, loans, anything where my assets are being used as security." What followed was a revelation more painful than overhearing Laurel's cruel comment. 4 credit cards with limits totaling $75,000, all guaranteed by me, a personal loan for $30,000 taken out 2 years ago, a home equity guarantee on their house. "And when were these arrangements made?" I asked, voice steady despite my shaking hands. "The oldest credit account was opened 8 years ago. The most recent was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, when Laurel had called crying about Kent's business struggles, when I'd offered to send money and she'd refused, saying, 'We don't need charity, Mom, just some moral support.' What she'd meant was that my signature was more valuable than my sympathy." After the bank, I called Harold's old investment advisor. "Mrs. Matt, what a pleasure. It's been what, 5 years?" "At least," I replied. "I need a complete accounting of my assets. Everything Harold left, everything I've acquired since." He emailed the summary that afternoon. The Colonial in Millbrook, now worth triple what we'd paid for it. Harold's life insurance, which I'd invested rather than spent. My teacher's pension. Stock holdings that had grown steadily through careful management. Family heirlooms, including my mother's sapphire ring and Harold's grandfather's pocket watch collection. In total, just over 1.9 million, almost enough for the beachfront property in Rhode Island that Laurel and Kent had been saving for, while claiming they couldn't afford plane tickets to visit me for Christmas. The beach house. The final piece clicked into place when I called Kent's mother, Martha, with whom I'd always maintained a cordial, if distant, relationship. "Bertie, how lovely. Are you calling about the beach house? I know Laurel is so excited." "The beach house?" I kept my voice carefully neutral. "The one they're closing on next month. Kent said the loan from his father and I really helped make it happen, though I understand you're contributing as well." I wasn't, at least not knowingly, but I was beginning to understand exactly what role my financial stability played in their lives. That evening, I sat on the hotel bed surrounded by printouts and notes, constructing a timeline of financial and emotional manipulation so methodical it could only be deliberate. Each withdrawal from my emotional bank account corresponded with a withdrawal from my financial one. Each canceled visit came with a new request for support. Each dismissal of my place in their lives was accompanied by an expansion of my place in their financial planning. I thought of Harold, how carefully he'd built our security, how proud he'd been to leave me provided for. "Take care of Laurel," he'd said in those final days, "but don't let her take advantage of your heart." He'd seen what I'd refused to acknowledge. In the hotel mirror, I saw not just a foolish old woman who'd been blind to betrayal, but the shadow of someone stronger, someone who'd raised a child alone for long stretches during Harold's military deployments, who'd earned a master's degree at 40, while working full-time, who'd faced cancer with more courage than she now faced family dysfunction. I made one final call that night to Harriet McGill, my bridge partner for 15 years and the most ruthless estate attorney in 3 counties. "I need to see you," I said, when she answered. "It's about my will." "Is this about Laurel?" Harriet asked with characteristic directness. "Yes, and about me." "About time," she replied. "My office Thursday, 10 a.m. When I hung up, I felt something unfamiliar. Not the ache of betrayal or the hollow of grief, but a cool, clear certainty. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, beginning with the woman in the mirror. Harriet's office featured coastal views and furniture too uncomfortable for lingering. Like Harriet herself, the space discouraged weakness. At 72, she still colored her hair flame red and wore shoes that added 3 inches to her already imposing height. "You look different," she said instead of hello. "I am different." She nodded once, gestured to a chair. "Tell me." I did. Everything from the 9-hour drive to the overheard conversation to the financial discoveries. Harriet took notes without interrupting, her expression unchanging even at the most painful details. "And now," she asked when I finished, "I want to change my will, all of it, and I need advice on removing my financial support without exposing myself to liability." Harriet's smile was brief but genuine. "I've been waiting years for you to say those words." Let's start with the will. For 2 hours, we reconstructed my estate plan. The house on Maple Street, the investment portfolio, and all financial assets would go to the Millbrook Women's Shelter, where I'd volunteered after Harold died. My personal items would be distributed among friends, with specific bequests for Theta and other neighbors who'd shown genuine care. "And for Laurel?" Harriet asked, pen poised. I thought carefully. "My recipe box and my diaries, so she can read about the mother she dismissed and the life she didn't value." Harriet made a note. "Deliciously petty. I approve." Next came the financial disentanglement. Harriet brought in her partner, who specialized in banking law, and together we crafted letters removing my guarantees from Laurel and Kent's credit accounts, effective immediately. We notified their mortgage company that I was rescinding the secondary guarantee on their home loan. We closed joint accounts I'd forgotten existed and opened new ones solely in my name. "They'll feel this within days," Harriet's partner warned. "Credit limits will be reduced, possibly to zero. Loan terms may be reconsidered." "I understand," I said, signing another form with steady hands. "The beach house closing will almost certainly fall through without your financial back-in," Harriet added. I remembered Laurel's voice. God, I hope she crashes. I thought of their laughter, the casual cruelty of people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. "So be it," I replied. Before leaving Harriet's office, I made one more decision. I called Martha Richards again. "I wanted to let you know I've removed my financial guarantees from Laurel and Kent's accounts," I said without preamble. "I don't understand," she replied, confusion evident. "What guarantees?" "The ones they've been using to secure credit and loans, including, I suspect, the loan for the beach house." Silence then. "Bertie, they told us you were contributing half the down payment. That's why we agreed to loan them the other half." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Well, I'm not, and I won't be. I thought you should know before the closing." That evening, back in my hotel room, I felt neither triumph nor guilt, but a strange calm clarity. I ordered room service, a luxury I rarely allowed myself, and ate watching the sunset over the White Plains skyline. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon, calls from unknown numbers I suspected were Kent, trying different phones to reach me. Finally, I answered one. "What have you done?" Kent's voice, tight with panic rather than concern. "Hello, Kent. I'm well, thank you for asking. The bank called, all our credit cards. They're saying the accounts are being restructured because you've removed your guarantee. The mortgage company, too. And Martha called about the beach house." "Yes, I spoke with her." "Interesting that you told your parents I was contributing to the down payment when we never discussed such a thing." "It was a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "Look, we need to talk about this. Whatever you think you heard that day, I know exactly what I heard, and what I've learned since then makes it clear it wasn't a momentary lapse, but a pattern. Bertie, please. No more, Kent. No more manipulations. No more guarantees. No more financing a life that excludes me, except when my credit score is needed. Give Laurel a message from me. The woman she hoped would crash has finally woken up." I hung up and blocked his number. Then I opened my laptop and booked a flight home for the following day. 9 hours of driving had brought me to revelation. A 90-minute flight would carry me toward resolution. As I packed my new clothes into my old suitcase, I felt neither young nor old, neither victorious nor defeated, but something else entirely. Free. Free of illusions about my daughter's love. Free of financial entanglements that had bound me to people who wished me harm. free to rewrite the final chapters of my life without obligation to those who had relinquished any claim to my heart. The rain that had accompanied my journey to Laurel's had given way to clear skies, as if the universe itself approved of my newfound clarity. At 78, I had finally learned that some storms aren't meant to be endured. They're meant to wash away what no longer deserves to stand. Home felt different when I returned. The familiar rooms of my colonial held the same furniture, the same photographs, the same view of the maple tree Harold had planted when Laurel was born. But I moved through these spaces as someone new, a woman who had finally recognized her own worth. Mr. Darcy greeted me with his usual indifference, then spent the evening on my lap, as if to ensure I wouldn't disappear again. Theda brought over the promised scotch and sat with me on the back porch as twilight settled over the garden. "They've been calling me daily," she said, swirling amber liquid in her glass. "Laurel sounds less worried and more angry now." "The financial notifications must have started arriving," I replied. Theda's eyebrows rose. "What exactly did you do?" I told her everything: the changed will, the removed guarantees, the beach house revelation. When I finished, Theda raised her glass in a silent toast. "Harold would be proud," she said simply. The first letter arrived 3 days after my return. Thick cream stationery, Laurel's precise handwriting on the envelope, formal in a way our relationship had never been. "Dear Mom, I don't know what's happening. You won't answer our calls. The bank says our credit limit has been reduced because you're no longer serving as our guarantor. Kent's mother says you called her, asking about that loan we took from them last year. Whatever you think you heard that day, you misunderstood. We were joking. It was just dark humor after a stressful week. You know how Kent and I talk sometimes. Please call us. We're worried about you. Love, Laurel." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just gaslighting wrapped in concern, financial panic disguised as filial worry. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box where I kept Laurel's childhood drawings, adding this final piece of evidence to the archive of our relationship. That evening, Kent called from yet another new number. "The beach house closing is next Friday," he said, without greeting. "The sellers won't extend again. We need the guarantee reinstated by Monday." "Hello, Kent. I'm afraid that won't be possible." "Bertie, be reasonable. This is our dream home. We've been working toward this for years." "Interesting. During those same years, you told me you couldn't afford plane tickets to visit for Christmas." Silence. "Then that was different. Travel during the holidays is expensive and a $500,000 beach house isn't? Goodbye, Kent." I hung up, feeling neither satisfaction nor remorse, just a quiet certainty that I was finally standing on solid ground. The next week brought escalating desperation, daily letters from Laurel, each less about reconciliation and more about financial urgency. Voice messages from Kent, alternating between charm and thinly veiled accusations. Even calls from their friends, people I'd met briefly at functions where I'd been introduced as Laurel's mom rather than by my name, suddenly concerned about my well-being. Their mortgage company sent a formal letter to my home address requesting verification of my withdrawal as secondary guarantor. Their credit card companies did the same. The paper trail of their financial house of cards arrived daily in my mailbox, each envelope confirming how thoroughly they had entangled me in their finances without my informed consent. On Wednesday, a text from an unknown number: "Mom, please. We're going to lose the beach house, all that money down the drain." "Is that what you want?" I didn't respond, but the message clarified something important. Even now, after everything, Laurel's concern was for the house, not for the relationship. Not once in her messages had she addressed the cruel words I'd overheard, except to dismiss them as a joke I had misunderstood. Friday morning, I met Zoe, Laurel's best friend since college, at a cafe in town. I'd called her, not the other way around. Thank you for coming, I said as we settled with our coffee. Zoe looked uncomfortable. Laurel's worried sick about you, Bertie. She says you misunderstood something and now you're punishing her. I smiled. Did she tell you what I misunderstood? She said you overheard a private conversation and took it the wrong way. I heard my daughter hope I would crash my car and die, I said calmly. Tell me, Zoe, how should I have taken that? Her eyes widened. She didn't say that. She couldn't have. She did, and her husband laughed. I took a sip of my tea. Did she also tell you they've been using me as a credit guarantor for years? That they borrowed money from Kent's parents for a down payment on a beach house while telling me they couldn't afford to visit for Christmas? Zoe's silence was answer enough. I'm not meeting you to complain, I continued. I'm meeting you to give you this. I slid an envelope across the table. It's an invitation to my 79th birthday party next month. I'd like you to come. Laurel and Kent aren't invited. As Zoe left, visibly shaken, I felt neither vindication nor guilt, just the quiet certainty that truth, once spoken, creates its own justice. That afternoon, I received a text from Martha Richards. The beach house close-in has been canceled. I think you should know they're blaming you to everyone who will listen. I texted back, thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry they put you in this position. Her response came quickly. Don't be. George and I are beginning to see them more clearly now. We should have listened to you years ago. Perhaps that was the first real victory, not the financial consequences I'd set in motion, but this small acknowledgement that I hadn't been wrong all along. 4 weeks after leaving the cake, I received another call from Laurel. This time I answered. Mom, she said, her voice breaking with what sounded like relief. Finally, we've been so worried. Have you? I asked, keeping my tone light. Of course we have. You disappeared. You changed your financial arrangements without telling us. You've been talking to our friends behind our backs. I heard what you said, Laurel, I interrupted, about hoping I would crash, about wanting a weekend without my guilt trips. Silence stretched between us. That was just, don't, I said. Don't insult me by lying now. She started crying, not the manipulative tears I'd seen so often in recent years, but what sounded like genuine sobs. We didn't mean it. We were just stressed. You call so often, and you always sound so lonely, and we feel so guilty. That's the problem, I said. You see my love as a burden, my calls as an obligation, my presence as something to endure. That's not fair, she whispered. Neither was wishing me dead, I replied. But here we are. What do you want from me? She asked finally. Nothing, I said. That's the point. I don't want anything from you anymore. Not your time, not your attention, not your pretend affection. I've changed my will, removed my financial support, and started building a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for crumbs from my only child. You can't just cut us off. Her voice rose, panic edging in. The beach house closing failed. Our credit cards are maxed out. Kent's parents are asking questions about loans we can't repay right now, and there it was, not concern for me, but for what I could provide. Is that why you're calling, Laurel? To get the financial tap turned back on? No, she protested, but too quickly. I want to fix our relationship. I love you, Mom. Do you? Because love requires respect, and respect requires honesty. You haven't been honest with me in years about your feelings, about your finances, about my place in your life. That's not true, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. When's the last time you visited without asking for something? When's the last time you called just to talk, not to manage my expectations or set up some boundary? When's the last time you treated me like a person you value rather than an obligation you manage? Her silence was answer enough. I won't be your bank anymore, Laurel, and I won't be your emotional punching bag either. If you want a relationship with me, it will be on new terms, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and complete honesty. And if I can't meet these terms, her voice had hardened, the victim facade slipping, then we don't have a relationship. It's that simple. You would choose being right over being my mother after everything you've always said about family coming first? Family does come first, I agreed. But what you and Kent have shown me isn't family. It's exploitation dressed up as obligation. I deserve better. This is about the money, isn't it? She said suddenly. You're punishing us financially because your feelings got hurt. No, Laurel, this is about consequences. For perhaps the first time in your adult life, your actions toward me have real consequences. The financial part is just the most tangible aspect. Kent says you've always been manipulative, she said, a last desperate jab. That you use guilt to control me. I laughed, genuinely amused. Says the man who convinced me to guarantee loans for a beach house you told me you couldn't afford. The irony would be delicious if it weren't so sad. So that's it. 30 years of being my mother erased because of one comment you overheard. Not erased, Laurel, transformed. I'm still your mother. I still love the child you were and the woman you could be. But I no longer accept the role you've assigned me, financial security blanket and emotional scapegoat. If you want a relationship with me, you'll need to build it on truth, starting with acknowledging what I heard that day. And if I apologize, if I say I'm sorry for what you heard, will you reinstate the guarantees, help with the beach house? Even now, she couldn't separate relationship from financial benefit. Even now, an apology was a transaction, not a heal-in. Goodbye, Laurel, I said softly. When you're ready to talk about us without mentioning money, you know where to find me. I hung up before she could respond, feeling neither triumph nor defeat, but something more profound, peace. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without fear of abandonment, because I'd already been abandoned in all the ways that mattered. Outside my window, spring had arrived while I wasn't looking. The maple tree Harold had planted was budding, green promises unfurling toward the sun. Soon it would provide shade for the garden I'd neglected last summer, too busy trying to maintain a relationship that existed only in my hope. This year I would plant tomatoes again, and perhaps something new, blueberries, or that asparagus Theta had been encouraging me to try. Plants that take years to establish, but once rooted, produce for decades. At 78, I still had time to grow something lasting, something real. 6 weeks after the rainstorm, I hosted my birthday party in the garden of my Millbrook home. Not the excessive celebration Laurel had always pushed for. You should rent the country club, Mom. Make it special. But something genuinely reflective of who I am. Theta was there with her infamous potato salad. Harriet came, her flame-red hair visible from 3 houses away. My bridge club, my book group, the women I'd volunteered with at the library, people who had been relegated to the periphery of my life while I centered those who valued me least. And Zoe came, having chosen our honest conversation over decades of friendship with Laurel. She tried to make me choose sides, she admitted, as we arranged cucumber sandwiches on my mother's silver platters. Said I was betraying her by coming today. And yet, here you are, I observed. Here I am, she agreed. It turns out loyalty has limits, especially when someone expects you to ignore cruelty. We ate carrot cake, not the recipe I'd left on Laurel's counter, but a new one I'd created with ginger and orange zest and a hint of cardamom. I served it on my good china, the set I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed important enough to warrant their use. Harriet raised her glass as the evening light turned golden across my lawn. To Bertie, who at 79 has more courage than most people half her age. To new beginnings, Theta added, and to knowing your own worth. I looked around at these faces, some known for decades, others more recent additions to my life, and felt something expand in my chest. This was family, chosen and authentic. This was connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The text still came from Laurel, less frequent now, but no less calculating. Mom, the mortgage company is asking questions, and Kent's car needs repairs we can't afford right now. And finally, I don't understand why you're punishing us financially for an offhand comment. I didn't respond. Some lessons can only be learned through experience, and Laurel's education in consequences was still ongoing. Instead, I focused on rebuilding the life I'd put on hold while waiting for my daughter's approval. I rejoined the library board I'd left when Laurel suggested it took too much of my time away from family. I signed up for watercolor classes at the community center, something I'd wanted to try since Harold died but never prioritized. Most significantly, I began volunteering at the Millbrook Women's Shelter 3 afternoons a week. Many residents were roughly Laurel's age, women rebuilding after relationships that had diminished rather than enhanced their lives. I helped with resumes, practiced interview skills with them, sometimes just listened as they processed how they'd found themselves in situations they'd never imagined. You're not like the other older volunteers, a young woman told me as we worked on her job applications. You understand how love and hurt can come from the same person. I've had some experience, I said. In their stories, I saw echoes of my own. When the shelter director heard I'd changed my will to benefit them, she took me to lunch. That's a generous gift, Bertie. May I ask why? I told her about Laurel, the conversation I'd overheard, the realization of how I'd been used. So this is about punishing your daughter, she asked. No, I said. It's about honoring what matters. These women are rebuilding with dignity. I'd rather support that than entitlement. By autumn, I'd established a rhythm to my days that felt both new and familiar, like returning to a version of myself I'd set aside years ago. I planted those blueberry bushes Theta had recommended and joined a hiking group for seniors that met weekly to explore local trails. Laurel sent a birthday card, store bought, with a generic message and a gift card to a restaurant chain. No personal note, no acknowledgement of our last conversation. I sent a polite thank you text, maintaining the boundary I'd established cordiality without capitulation. The financial consequences continued to unfold for her and Kent. Through Martha, with whom I now had coffee monthly, I learned they'd downsized to a smaller house, unable to maintain the tutor without my financial backing. Ken had taken a second job. Laurel had started selling real estate, something she'd once dismissed as beneath her education level. I took no pleasure in their struggles, but I recognized their necessity. For too long, I had protected them from the natural outcomes of their choices. Now, reality was providing what my love had prevented, the chance to grow through adversity. In November, as the first snow dusted my maple tree, Zoe called with news. Laurel was pregnant. She's about 3 months along, Zoe said. I thought you should know. I sat with this information for several days, feelings tangled like yarn I couldn't unravel. A grandchild, something I'd wanted but stopped expecting as Laurel approached 50. A new person who would exist beyond the complications of our relationship. A life coming into being even as others were being redesigned. After careful consideration, I sent Laurel a card, not a text or an email, but a proper card on fine stationery. Inside, I wrote simply, I've heard your news. A child changes everything, sometimes by their presence, sometimes by their absence. I wish you the wisdom to value what matters most. If you ever want to discuss a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial entanglement, my door remains open, with love. She didn't respond, but I hadn't expected her to. Some seeds take time to germinate if they grow at all. 6 months after that rainy drive to Connecticut, I sat in my kitchen making a shopping list for Thanksgiving dinner. I'd invited Theta, Harriet, and several new friends from the shelter and hiking group, people who had become my chosen family during this season of reinvention. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail before curiosity won out. Hello? Mrs. Matt, this is Dr. Leland from Hartford Memorial. I have your daughter, Laurel, here. She's asked me to call you. My heart stuttered. Is she all right? She's stable. She experienced some bleeding and was concerned about the pregnancy. We've run tests and everything looks fine, but we're keeping her overnight for observation. Her husband is traveling for work and she asked if I would call you. Thank you for letting me know, I said, mind already calculating the drive time to Hartford. She also asked. The doctor hesitated, then continued more softly. She asked if you would come. She said to tell you she's sorry, but only if you meant what you wrote in your card. I closed my eyes. Tell her I'll be there in 3 hours. The drive to Hartford was nothing like 6 months ago. No rain, no cake, no hope or heartbreak. Just clear November sun and the steady hum of the highway. Laurel looked small in the hospital bed, one hand over the slight swell of her belly. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears, not manipulative, but real. You came? You asked, I said, sitting beside her. For a moment, we listened to the quiet beeping of machines. I've been seeing a therapist, she said. At first for the stress, but it's become more than that. I waited, allowing her the space to continue. She asked me questions no one's ever asked, about why I resented your calls, why I felt such obligation rather than connection, why I could say such cruel things about someone who had only shown me love. Laurel looked up, meeting my eyes. I didn't have good answers. And now? I asked softly. Now, I'm beginning to understand that I've been punishing you for years, for being alone after Dad died, for needing me when I wanted independence, for representing a simpler life when I was trying so hard to build something impressive. Her voice broke. For loving me unconditionally when I couldn't love myself that way. It wasn't a complete reckoning. Such things take years, not months. But it was a beginning, a seed breaking through hard ground. The financial stuff, she continued, losing the beach house, downsizing, Kent having to take that second job. It's been hard, really hard. But my therapist says, she gave a small, watery laugh. She says it's the best thing that could have happened to us, that we were building a life on appearances rather than authentic connection. And what do you think? I asked. I think she's right. And I think you knew that all along. Laurel reached for my hand, tentatively. I'm not asking for money, Mom, or guarantees or anything material. I'd like to try again, to build something real between us. Before this baby comes, I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. I'd like that too. We didn't solve everything that day in the hospital. Real healing isn't a moment, but a process full of setbacks and small victories. In the months that followed, we established new patterns. Weekly coffees where financial matters were explicitly off limits, occasional family dinners where conversation went deeper than surface pleasantries. Kent struggled more with the new arrangement. His charm had always been a currency that depreciated rapidly when it couldn't be exchanged for material benefit. But he was trying, if only for Laurel's sake and the child they were expecting. As for me, I maintained the life I'd built during our estrangement. The women's shelter remained in my will, though I added a trust for my grandchild's education. My friendships deepened. My blueberry bushes took root. I continued painting watercolors, hiking local trails, and baking new recipes that were entirely my own creation. Some might call what I did revenge. I prefer to think of it as consequences. At 79, I finally learned that love without respect isn't love at all, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop pretending. The rain falls differently now, not as a storm to be weathered, but as a reminder that even the hardest things eventually clear, leaving the world washed clean and ready for whatever comes next. The carrot cake I bake these days has less sugar and more spice, like me, perhaps. the truth that finally set us all free. This morning, as I mixed batter for a new recipe, my phone lit up with a message from Laurel, an ultrasound image, a tiny profile in black and white, with the simple text, "Your granddaughter. She has your nose." I touched the screen gently, this window into a future I hadn't been sure I'd live to see. Then I returned to my bacon, folding in fresh ingredients, creating something that had never existed before, much like the life I was building at 79. One honest conversation, one boundary, one choice at a time. The timer rang. It was time to take the cake out of the oven. Time to move forward, eyes open, heart cautious, but not closed. Time to accept that some journeys begin not with a 9-hour drive through rain, but with the courage to say, enough. I am worth more than this. We all are. At what age did you finally learn to value yourself above others' expectations? It's never too late to set boundaries and start again, whether you're 29, 59, or 79. Birdie's journey reminds us that self respect isn't selfish, it's essential. Share this story if you've ever had to walk away to find yourself. Follow for more tales of resilience, reinvention, and the quiet courage it takes to begin again. Remember, you're never too old to bake a new recipe for yourself.